Hi, I'm Chris Ridenour, CTO of Lisnr. We're a music tech company here inside Centrifuge. South by is kind of really important to us to both work with the tech side and the music side. This year we went down there, we noticed a lot of brands who just want to work with startups. They're all looking for the best startup. It's always kind of a startup battle between the brands. And it's kind of posed, an interesting problem and a benefit as well, that brands are kind of trying to figure out how to work with startups still. It's kind of a couple of years in the making, and startups are trying to figure out how to scale with the brands. So it's a really interesting kind of dynamic going on right now.
All right, I'm Chris Ridenour. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Lisnr. Like Roanne said, we're here. We're actually just right there. And I kind of have an interesting love story of South by. So Lisnr last year was actually started on what's called the Startup Bus. So the Startup Bus was a competition that left 10 different cities. The closest one being, it was technically the Cincinnati bus, but it left out of Columbus for whatever reason. And
that's another story.
Yeah, we got on the bus, and there's 5 of us, and we came up with the idea of Lisnr. And so the bus drove around the country for 72 hours, kind of sort of heading towards Austin. Doesn't take 72 hours to get there, but we made it happen. The idea was when we got to Austin, we were supposed to have formed a company and had a product and had branding and pitching, so crazy competition, no sleep, the internet barely worked, it was just basically running off your cell phone. And when we got down there, we made it to the semifinals, bombed the pitch and lost. But it's okay.
A working product.
Yeah, well, we had a working product. Sorry, it's a white wall. So we got down there, and even in the 72 hours that we'd only been a company, Pepsi had heard of us, and Disney had heard of us, and they both reached out to us while we were down there. So we started thinking, well, maybe we're onto something here. So we all got back to Cincinnati and actually went forward, started talking with Cincy Tech, and then August of last year actually got funded, became a real company, real people, left our full-time jobs, and then came to Centrifuge. So I would say for this year, though, for South by, it's really just been a weird, it's kind of the second year coming. I saw it the first year, a lot of Disney and Pepsi are all down there. They've always been down there, probably the last 5 years, kind of increasing how they're working, but back then they didn't really know what to do with startups. They were kind of scared of us. A lot of us were trying to disrupt their business. A lot of us were just not really, we didn't have the capacity to work with big brands. But this year you start to see brands worth $5-8 billion reaching out to companies worth $5 million or less, and wanting to work with us. And it's been a really interesting dynamic. So, Lisnr right now, we're in a program called Mobile Futures. This is Mondelez, which is just Kraft's little spin-off of Oreo, Trident. Little spin-off, $80 billion spin-off of all these big brands, and they paired each brand with a startup. That the startup had to be, worth more than, 1 million, but less than 10 million. So they were kind of looking for these little guys, and it's kind of been a competition between the brands of who has the best startup. It's almost like battling pets, It's really interesting to see how they're trying to work with us and try and leverage our speed and our, just different sort of thinking, because you do kind of get set in a mindset when you're in a bigger brand, and especially when you compare that to someone who's eating ramen every day. So it's been really interesting how they're trying to work with each other. So I think next year it's probably going to hit a pinnacle of, all these brands are going to come down there with a startup that they're supporting and not necessarily by themselves. But in another interesting South by trend, it's almost gotten too big. You probably have heard this. I think there was, the 20,000 interactive people down there, but we were down there with 180,000 people. There's just over 100,000 people that go down the South by without a badge, without a hotel room. They just go. And it gets absolutely insane. I was one of them. I did not have a badge. I was out there in any sort of official capacity. And it's almost gotten too big. This August, they're actually starting the South by Southwest Startups in Vegas. They're trying to get all the startup people, all the VCs and everything, all those crowdfunding things and kind of put them in Vegas where there's actually the capacity.
Yeah.
Like they said, there's probably 200,000 to 300,000 people who went to South by in some fashion this year, and there's 6,000 hotel rooms. So we're compare that to Vegas where there's 150,000 hotel rooms, so it's a little bit more prepared. But yeah, so I think next year you're going to see it get a little smaller, especially with the startups pulled out, and I think they're going to start pulling out gaming and put them somewhere else or at least on a different time frame. But
Was Tony Hsieh and the whole Vegas tech scene integral to making that happen? Do you know?
I don't know.
I feel like they had definitely Vegas tech was had a big presence. They must have put a ton of money into that.
Oh yeah.